Hi, I'm David Mancy with Cannabis Equipment News, and with me today is Ric Schumacher, President and CEO of Pressure BioSciences. Thank you very much for joining me today.
Oh, thanks for having me, and happy Thanksgiving.
Yeah, same to you, man. It'll be a different holiday this year, but I'm excited nonetheless.
It's going to be. Yes.
So tell me a little bit about your company. Give me an overview as to what you guys do and some of the markets that you guys cover.
Well, we're a publicly traded company, Pressure BioSciences. We're in the pressure field, as you might have figured out from our name. Mm-hmm. We make instruments, very precise instruments that are used primarily in the life sciences right now, although with a new instrument that we're developing and expecting to release next year, it clearly has a play in many applications outside of life sciences, in cosmetics, in nutraceuticals and pharmaceuticals, et cetera, things like that. So we're excited about that expansion of our business. I am a scientist. I spent 13 years at Harvard Medical School doing research as a young guy. I left to start my first company. I've had 4 companies now. Pressure Bio is my 4th company. The first 3 companies were all biotech related, all successful. I was in the HIV, Hepatitis B, Hepatitis C field for many years, and developing products that could make the testing for those molecules and those infectious agents better. So what's going on now with the pandemic is something which I've lived through with HIV, Hepatitis B, and Hepatitis C in the past. But Pressure BioSciences is much different than those first 3 companies. Pressure BioSciences is, we're developing products that rely on using an incredible force of Mother Nature called pressure. Pressure can move at the speed of sound. Pressure can be turned on and off like a light switch. So as a scientist, when you're in the laboratory, one of the things you need to do as a research scientist is control molecules. And we control molecules by making them faster or slower, by putting them into solution, by using temperature, heat, and cold, by using chemicals. We've tried something new. We're trying pressure. It's been known for many centuries that pressure can have an effect on molecules. But really, we're one of the first companies to ever come out with commercial grade instruments that allow scientists to control the pressure so exquisitely that they can actually replace or augment their temperature control and their chemical control by using pressure. Our pressures go from anywhere from about 1,000 pounds per square inch, which by itself, David, is a pretty high pressure, 1,000 pounds, up to 45,000 pounds per square inch right now on our everyday instruments. Wow. Give me an idea of what that is. If you go to the Marianas Trench, the deepest part of the ocean in the Pacific Rim, it's 6 miles of ocean. If you and I were having this interview at the bottom of the Marianas Trench, we'd have about 17,000 pounds per square inch or PSI on us. And our instruments get to 17,000 PSI very safely, very quickly in a millisecond, but we can go up to right now routinely 45,000. And we do have an instrument that goes close to 100,000 PSI.
So how are people using instruments that attain these pressures?
So as a scientist, let's say we're working in the area of virology, which is, of course, on everybody's mind right now. We're trying to develop an antidote, a drug to fight against a certain viral disease or any type of bacterial disease. We need to open up those structures, those cells, viruses, bacteria, fungi, spores, human cells, white cells, red cells, cancer cells. Because all the good stuff, all the things that are going to give us the information that we need to be able to develop that antidote, to develop that prevention strategy, or to develop the drug that's going to fight off that disease, is most likely held inside of the cell. Whether it's a virus or a bacteria, whatever. So we need to get and find the Achilles heel of that virus, of that bacteria, that cancer cell. So we got to open it up. That's the simplest thing. It sounds so simple to do. I was taught how to do that as a scientist, 100 years ago. Just beat up the cell. The problem is that now with these sophisticated instruments that we have out in the field, we know that if we beat up the cell, we could actually change, modify, distort some of those incredible molecules that we're trying to get out of the cell in order to be able to determine how to fight that disease or how to fight that infectious disease. And so we need to be more careful when we prepare our sample. It's called sample preparation. We need to be more careful. So instead of taking, let's say we have a walnut and we want to break it open and have the nut, we can take a mallet and bang that walnut into smithereens and open it up and have the nut inside, right? Or we could take a nutcracker and very carefully break it in half. Pressure, think about pressure breaking a cell like you and me, David, squeezing a sponge. You take a sponge and you wipe up a table and you got lots of stuff in the sponge. How do you get it out? We squeeze it and we squeeze it and we squeeze it till we squeeze things out. We use Mother Nature, we use pressure. Our instruments have a chamber and basically they're a pressure chamber, and we can determine how much pressure, how long to put it under pressure, and how many times we want to turn the pressure on and off, cycle the pressure. And once we determine what pressure we need to break open a certain virus or a certain bacteria, instead of just banging it over the head with a hammer to break it, we squeeze the cell until we break it and release the DNA, the RNA, the proteins and lipids, these major macromolecules that we're going to study and determine how do we find the Achilles heel of that disease. So that's what we do. We use pressure in a pressure chamber. We determine what we need to break open that cell. We put the cells inside special tubes that we make and sell, and we dial in the pressure, and then we let the machine do its work and break open those cells. And then the real work begins of studying all those molecules and trying to find that one thing or those two things that can help us eradicate that disease, prevent that disease, cure that individual.
So all these instruments, are they under the ultra shear technology umbrella?
Okay. No, we have 3 different platforms. Okay. Our first platform we call pressure cycling technology, or PCT. I should tell you, we have 26 issued patents now. Most of the patents are in pressure cycling technology. That's where we started out about 14 years ago. We turn pressure on and off, like turning a light switch on and off. And the amazing thing about that is, as a scientist, if I'm working on trying to mix chemicals or mix solutions in a lab, I'm trying to break something open and I add heat or cold or chemicals, I need to then bring it back to the normal where it was before. And that's going to take time. If I heat it up, I'm going to have to cool it down. If I add chemicals, I'm going to have to take the chemicals out. But with pressure, I turn pressure on, it immediately goes to a certain pressure. I can then turn the pressure on and off a number of times until I do what I need to do. And in this case, maybe break that molecule to free the DNA and proteins and lipids. And once I've done that, I can just shut the pressure down again. So I'm immediately back to my normal equilibrium where I started, but I've broken up the cell, the virus, the bacteria, and released all of those molecules. So our first platform is pressure cycling technology. We have about 200 customers all over the world, just about in every continent of the world, some of the top research laboratories, academic institutions, government institutions, biotech companies. These are our customers, and they're using it for breaking cells and for many other things that we don't need to go into here, but it can do many, many other things in terms of speeding up reactions, slowing down reactions, making things work faster or slower. That's our first platform. Our second platform is called BaroFold. Baro stands for pressure, like a barometer, right? BaroFold. A protein, without getting too scientific here, protein is a molecule that's made up of what we call peptides, which are strings of amino acids, and these molecules, these peptides, they fold over each other. So as they fold over each other, they form a protein. And the amazing thing about Mother Nature and about proteins is a protein has to have a very specific structure. And once it has that structure, it's going to have a function, like a lock and a key. And if it's slightly off, it is not going to be able to have that same function. In fact, it might even have a deleterious effect if given to a patient as a drug. So when companies make their proteins in the lab, as they're doing, about 20% of all drugs in the market are protein-based. 20 years ago, none of them were. 20 years from now, maybe 50% of drugs will be protein-based. We make the proteins in the lab. And as we put these proteins together in the lab, if they're not formed right, if they're not folded exactly right, you can't use it, and you might be wasting $1 million or $5 million worth of product. We have patents that say you can put, if you put these proteins that you've made in the lab under pressure, you can actually unfold these peptides and then refold them, and sometimes they fold exactly right. So the long and short of it is our second platform is one in which we work with biotech companies that are making protein-based drugs. And if they want to make them faster, less expensive, or if they're having an issue with the folding of the proteins, we might be able to help. The third platform is the one that we plan on talking about today. A third platform is called, as you mentioned, ultra shear technology. It's a platform that we started working on 3 years ago. And the way we started is we were awarded a $1 million grant from the U.S. Department of Agriculture, along with our partner and tremendous partner in Ohio State University and their College of Food Agriculture. And Dr. Bala there is a professor who's been working in the pressure area for a number of years, along with one of our key scientists, engineers, Dr. Ting, who's a pioneer in using pressure in the food industry. And what the USDA wanted us to do was to see if we could develop an instrument using pressure that would allow us to put milk through it, and so that we could end up having shelf-stable milk, maybe stable for 6 months or longer at room temperature. And that would, when you take it out and drink it, it's going to taste like milk. Now, in some places, particularly in Europe, you can buy heat-treated milk. One of the brands is Parmalat. If you've ever tasted it, it's not very, in my opinion, and many people's opinion, it's not very good tasting milk because it's heat-treated. Pasteurization is heat, but it's a very small amount of heat for a very short period of time, just enough to kill the bacteria to a certain level so we can sell it as fresh milk, and we get, 5 or 10 days before it starts to sour because the bacteria continue to grow as it's in our refrigerator. Well, what if we could kill all these bacteria? What if we could actually kill all the pathogens in the milk so that now nothing's growing? You could put the milk on your shelf, leave it there for 6 months. And if you had a disaster site, if you wanted to ship milk in, which you can't do now without a refrigerated truck, you could ship it in. If you wanted to drink it refrigerated, you could refrigerate it then. So we're working on a project with our colleagues at Ohio State to develop a way to take milk so it doesn't get pasteurized, doesn't get overheated, where you actually control the heat and you reduce the bacteria or eliminate all of the bacteria and other pathogens by using high pressure. And pressure can do that. Now, what we've done, which is where our patents were filed, Dr. Ting, who's an amazing engineer, and Dr. Lazarev, they're my two chief guys. They've developed a method called ultra shear, which combines high pressure with shearing. Shearing is like cutting. So we have a very novel patent pending valve where we bring the milk up to a very high pressure. We release it at that high pressure, and it leaves the pressure chamber at, I'd call, supersonic speed. It goes through this valve, and we shear the milk. And what we're doing is we're actually shearing the molecules and bringing them down to nano-sized molecules. We do not believe we'll be affecting the taste of the milk. We think actually the taste will remain, the nutrients will remain. The difference is that we'll be making it commercially sterile, so it will have a very long-lasting shelf life. So I was explaining this to somebody about 3 years ago who was in the cannabis field, in the CBD field. And his jaw dropped, and he literally looked at me and said, "Rick, do you know what you have? You might be able to solve the biggest problem in CBD today." And I looked at him and I said, "Gosh, I hope so, but what is CBD?" I had no idea. This was 3 years ago. I now have a very good idea. As a scientist, I crave for more data. Many scientists are craving for more data, but there's certainly data that's been generated over those 3 years to tell us that CBD and other cannabinoids can certainly have acting and long-lasting effects in a number of areas. So the issue, though, is that as we all know, all of the cannabinoids come out of the plant in an oil. Many other products, many vitamins and nutrients that we take are in oils. Human bodies don't absorb oil well. There's a sort of a fight that goes on when we take something that's encased in oil. Your body, on the one hand, said, I need to get in there and pull out all these incredible nutrients out of that CBD. But the other part of your body is saying, we don't like oil. We've got to excrete this oil as quickly as possible. So you have this fight going on. I've got to pull the nutrients out of the oil. I've got to get rid of the oil. And getting rid of the oil wins in most cases. So I'm sure you've seen the data, and many of your listeners have seen the data, where CBD and oil, probably 5 or 10% bioavailable. The rest of it, the oil is excreted from the body before you're able to absorb it. So looking at nanoemulsions now, we know that emulsions are where liquids or products cannot go together. Milk is an emulsion, for instance, and we'll settle out. A great one I give as an example is raspberry vinaigrette. You know, what do you do when you put your vinaigrette salad dressing? Everybody says, I shake it like crazy, because that's the only way to mix it for a couple of seconds and it settles out. Mm-hmm. You put your vinaigrette through our system, we believe it'll come out as one solution. It'll never separate out, and it'll probably be as, if not more flavorful, and it'll certainly be more stable. So in talking to this person, they said, you really got to look into the CBD field, and that's what brought us to you.
Well, and that's so with the CBD field. I saw some of the videos online where you're showing people that say they have a water soluble product and they're trying to mix it into, for example, beverages. But the example showed, like, they said it kind of looked like toothpaste going into the water, whereas yours kind of mixes in and you sort of don't, undetected. You don't even see it because it mixes so well in the water.
If you can take the oil down to a small enough size, such as a nano size, which generally is regarded as what we call under 200 nanometers, so it's very small, smaller than bacteria, very small. If you can bring it down to that size, it can no longer reflect light, so it kind of disappears, and so it becomes clear. So that's one good way of knowing, do you really have a nanoemulsion? Many people, I think a lot of people understand the need to have a nanoemulsion when you're developing a CBD product or any other new product with a nutrient that's encased in oil. So you want to try to make it water soluble so that it can be transported around the body, so it can be in small, so it can be absorbed. How do you do that? A lot of folks are using chemicals, and you've seen some of the videos we had. And we don't know the companies. We simply went online and bought a number of different water soluble products, and many of them, when you put them, as you saw, when you put them into water, if it's water soluble because it's made through chemicals, as soon as you dilute out the chemical that's making it water soluble, it starts to precipitate, coagulate, and you can see it. We like to say that we use physics, not chemistry. We use a little bit of chemistry at the end in terms of emulsifiers to keep the tiny nano size oil droplets from coming back together. But for the most part, we use physics. What we really do, it sounds simple, and it is far from simple. I have brilliant team of scientists and engineers, and we've been working at this for 3 years. And they've had, and one of them, Dr. Ting, is a pioneer in using food and using pressure in the food industry for 20 years. So we think we've got it done. We announced about a month ago, we've settled in on the specifications of what's going to be our first generation instrument in the ultra shear technology field. But what we really do is we break the oil drop into droplets. And we think about a single oil drop coming out of an eyedropper that contains millions of molecules of CBD. We're going to break that drop using high pressure and shearing into millions of tiny little nano-sized droplets. And so those millions of molecules of CBD are going to be dispersed among those millions of tiny little oil droplets. So there's only going to be a handful of molecules of CBD in every tiny little nano droplet. Now, as you ingest that product, you have such big surface area that the fight of your enzymes that are trying to get to the nutrients inside the oil can actually win, because the oil droplets are so small and have so few molecules of CBD that you're able to get in and grab those and pull them out before your body excretes the oil out of the body. So that's really what we do is we use physics to break the oil drop into millions of droplets to allow the surface area to be massive, to allow the body to absorb whatever's inside that oil.
So the products, the sheet that you sent me, is that product not released yet? I just don't want to oh, okay. So we don't want to mention it by name or anything.
Well, we have a name. We call it the BioShear K45.
Okay. I didn't want to break an embargo or anything.
45,000 PSI. So
yeah,
it's one of the advantages that we have, in that as experts in using high pressure, particularly in the life sciences field, we have 350 instruments that, as I mentioned, all over the world. And these instruments, most of them will immediately go to anywhere between 1,000 and 45,000 PSI. Now, they're not ultra shear. They're not there for shearing, for cutting, for breaking. They're there for breaking cells inside of a chamber, bring it to a temperature, break it, release it. But it's not there in a fluid motion where you can take a liquid and have a constant flow and have it flowing around between a pressure chamber and this very exotic patent pending valve that will shear it. And so in this case, ultra shear is a whole new platform for us. The applications are mind-boggling when you think about industrial lubricants, and I thought I had my phone off. Industrial lubricants and pharmaceuticals, nutraceuticals, cosmetics. So there's so many emulsions that are used in this world of ours. Anything that's a liquid emulsion could, we think, benefit from our ultra shear technology platform.
Right. So, I mean, essentially anyone that wants to make like a CBD or THC infused beverage or other products, they would, need this technology in order for it to be effective for the body to process it, right?
Well, they need a technology to get them to a true water soluble, stable emulsion. And it's going to have to be a nano emulsion. I think everybody pretty much agrees. We in the market today, the emulsions are what we would call micro or macro emulsions. They're much bigger molecules, which is why the bioavailability. I try to read as many reports as I can see that come out, and I see that the true bioavailability of many of the products out there are in the 10% range. Estimated 10%. I see some where they're claiming 20, and many are around 5 to 10%. We need to get that to 90%. Can you imagine taking you got a headache and you need to take 400 milligrams of some product, and you take a 400 milligram, but your body only absorbs 40 milligrams of it? Your headache's not going to go away. So if you're taking 400 milligrams, you want to get 400 milligrams of that active ingredient out. The same thing is with CBD. I have 3 brothers. One of them was in Vietnam many years ago, and he has developed neuropathy in his feet that is just incredible for him. He wanted to try CBD. He tried CBD about a year and a half ago, and he said it just didn't work. It just didn't work. I said, Scott, what you need to do is you need to try a nano-emulsified CBD, because you're not getting enough of the active ingredient. So I got him some nano-emulsified CBD, and after the first 7 days, he said, I think there's a little difference. I'm not sure. About the 10th day, he called me and said, I can't believe it. It's working. I can't believe it. So, and that's not going to be, he's not going to be the Lone Ranger. There's a lot of good product out there, but we're just not getting enough of that absorbed into our body. So yes, whether it's our system or somebody else's system, we hope it's ours. We need to nano-emulsify that CBD so it becomes available.
Well, it's interesting to hear about your brother, because I hear that a lot in this particular industry is that people have a very personal connection to it and believe in the positive effects of it as a medicine. Do you have other connections to the CBD THC industry, or any other examples where you've seen it have a positive effect on people?
I've heard about these things. We're not touching the plant making the product. We're
Mhm.
an instrument company.
Yeah.
Um, this is maybe the toughest instrument I've ever been involved with in my career.
Mhm.
But it's got advantage. There are other companies out there, not many. There's a handful, I can count them on one hand, that have instruments that use pressure or instruments that use special kind of valves. But we don't think there's anybody out there that can come close to what we have. We haven't, our instruments, our first instrument, our first generation is going to go to 45,000 pounds per square inch. We have some data
Mhm.
generated internally that said that the higher the pressure, the better the final product, the final nanoemulsified product. So there are several companies that have instruments out there that go to 20, 25,000 PSI. We go to 45,000. And as I said, we have other instruments in other fields that go to 60, 70, 80,000 PSI. So we're looking forward to our second and third generation down the road. But right now, we need to get our first generation out in the middle of 2021. Very excited about looking at around the middle of 2021. This instrument is we're going to make 15 instruments. 3 of them are for internal use. 12 of them we told the world are going to be available for sale. We've already got purchase orders for all 12 of those instruments, and there's I believe 9 different companies. They're all CBD companies. I say CBD, they're all cannabinoid companies. Some of them are looking at CBG, CBN, CBD, but several have come into our place here. We've built a testing facility, a test lab, and we built a number of prototypes. We had 3 prototypes working, and they came in, they brought product in, and quite frankly, they were amazed at what they saw. Once they saw it work, they gave us an order for an instrument. So we're working hard to try to meet our goal. COVID has affected us a bit. Not We've worked through this as an essential business with our other instruments that are being used by some laboratories that are actually looking at the spike protein, for instance, of the novel coronavirus. We need to be here, and we need to support these 250 customers of ours with our instruments and our consumables. That's our pressure cycling business. But we also are coming in and developing our ultra shear product during this time. Unfortunately, some of our suppliers shut down. And so we hope to have released by about now, where we'd be doing this interview, I'd be saying, hey, David, we got great news. Our first 12 instruments are now in the field. It's delayed us maybe 6 or 8 months, but right now we're looking at a second quarter, middle of next year, 2021 release of our instruments. And once we get these in the field, and we have orders from many different states, and not all coming from one state. So they're coming from Nevada and California and other places, and even Massachusetts where we are. Once we have these in the field and people can see how it works, and they can come in here and see the final product and use it in our testing lab, I think it's going to change the paradigm a lot. I do.
So, I mean, like you said, you had 4, this is now your 4th company that you've worked on. To say that this is the toughest instrument that you worked on, that is a pretty impressive feat. Is it tough in terms of the engineering that's gone into it, just its capabilities? That's what makes it the toughest?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes. Keep naming them. It's we're trying to marry a few things all into one instrument, and we need to do things that in some cases we don't have to worry about the amount of pressure. Some cases we don't have to worry about the flow rate of the liquid material. In some cases we don't have to worry about the heat or cold. In this case, we have to worry about it all because it all affects the product. So it is a daunting task. We've been at it. And again, I don't know of any other commercial company in the world that has worked as much as we have with the highest pressures that we have in controlling all of this. And it's been a labor of love, but it's been tough. But we settled in on the final specifications in October. of 2020 in terms of our first generation K45 instrument. And we're building right now, we're building the so-called alpha or first unit. We're building 3 of them. We're building one for our colleagues and friends at Ohio State, and we're building one for our 2 different labs. And we're going to generate a lot of data with those. We're also developing a much larger instrument. The interesting thing about our technology, which I'm not sure anybody else can do, we can scale it down to where we can build a benchtop system where a lot of the people you've interviewed, I've seen a number of your interviews, a lot of people in the cannabis field or in other fields, you don't want to spend a lot of time, a lot of money on a big instrument and a lot of time running product through instrument. You want to have a more benchtop, small scale instrument. So we can scale it down we have a prototype of a small bench scale instrument that can do milliliters at a time, just to test out formulations and test out things. And on the other end, with Ohio State and the USDA, we're developing a system, believe it or not, that can, our goal is to do 2 liters a minute of milk. And whether it's 2 liters a minute of milk or 2 liters a minute of cannabis oil mixed with water to make an emulsion, it shouldn't matter. It's still going to have the same viscosity, and we should be able to do it. So everything between a few milliliters at a time to liters a minute is what we're working on with this technology. And I'm happy to say we received our first patent on ultra shear in the U.S. just 10 days ago. And we're very excited about that. We think that patent will be issued throughout Europe and Asia in the coming months and year. And we also have other patents that we filed. It's a very novel instrument that we put together.
With the 12 instruments scheduled for next year, are those primarily benchtop instruments? Just
No.
kind of get, no? Okay.
No. It's a good question. We do have people asking us for a benchtop because the benchtop, obviously a much smaller instrument, should be less expensive, and it would be, but also it's very valuable material. And if you're trying different formulations and trying different products, trying to see what the effect is on maybe some of the other cannabinoids, there's several hundred cannabinoids in the plant, and what's the effect of doing a process on CBN and CBG and versus CBD. What is the effect on the terpenes? What's the effect on anything in the plant? You'd like to maybe have a benchtop instrument. So our plans are to come out with a middle of the road, the instrument that will do liters a day, not liters a minute, but liters a day. It'll be bigger than your benchtop, but smaller than the large system that we're developing for the USDA with Ohio State. So it's going to be in the liters a day, maybe several liters an hour type of throughput versus the 2 liters a minute. But we will follow it with the benchtop instrument because we know there are a number of potential customers who need that benchtop.
Do you have a ballpark idea of what the middle of the road instrument is going to cost?
I do have a ballpark. It's a little bit less than $200,000. What it'll cost, and hopefully it's going to be a machine that's going to last and be used every day, all week long, 24/7, whatever one needs it to make product that that can be more useful than perhaps what they're doing now. One interesting aspect, David, there are nanoemulsions that are made for a number of things. Most of them are very small scale. And we know that a nanoemulsion is far more bioaccessible, far more bioavailable, far more water soluble. So theoretically, what that means, and for the CBD field, is you need much less. So if there's a manufacturer of a CBD product and they're making it for a drink or for a gummy or whatever, if they have it in a nanoemulsion form and you're getting 2, 3, 4, 5, 8 times more bioavailable CBD in that product, you should be able to use less of that. And I think just as importantly, some people think more importantly, you're going to be able to dose it extremely precisely. So because now you know that you have 94% bioavailability or whatever the number is, you're going to be able to dose that product so you put the exact amount in that you know the body is going to absorb. not an amount in. That's one of the problems now is everyone's product is different. And so when you take 125 milligrams, let's just throw out a number of something with CBD, how much of that 125 milligrams are you actually getting? How much of that's bioavailable to you? But if you had 125 milligrams and it was a nanoemulsion, you should be able to absorb almost all of that 125 milligrams. Now you can dose it. And that's what's very important for this industry. The industry has to get to the point where you're able to bring it on board as if it were something that is far more controlled as it is, let's say, in the pharmaceutical business.
So for all the other products that are not using a nanoemulsion, are most of those customers experiencing a placebo effect? And
I don't know.
You don't know? Okay.
I don't know. That's an interesting. I heard that the other day with coronavirus. That even with some people, they're getting they'll be getting a placebo effect. I don't know. What I do know is that the real effect is what we need, and the real effect is going to require. There's no doubt whether it's our instrument or somebody else's, it's going to require a nanoemulsion. You need to be able to make sure that CBD is available. I find it interesting because I can't tell I can't count on my two hands the number of times someone has said, "Oh, I know this company and they've got the best CBD in the world. They got a phenomenal strain of CBD." It's not phenomenal if you can't absorb it. It's not phenomenal if you excrete it. If 90% or 80% or 85% of it is excreted from your body, it's still in the oil. We need in this industry to make things into nanoemulsions so that they become bioavailable and so they can be dosed properly. That's what needs to be done. Again, we hope to be one of the companies that many of the folks that look to you for guidance, and many of the people that have been on your show will use, but it's clearly got to move in that direction. And that I can tell you when I talk to people, I rarely find someone who disagrees with that. Everyone says, no, we've got to go there. For most of these products, they got to be a nanoemulsion. Do they have to be clear? No, they don't have to be clear. Our product, as you saw, that we've put together in some of our videos, which is on our website, that product comes out very clear because it is a very small nanoemulsion, about 40 to 50 nanometers. Now, I tell you what, we're scientists and engineers here. We don't know what the size is. The size might be different depending on what the product use is going to be. The interesting thing about our technology is that we've already been able to control the size of the nanoemulsion. So our nanoemulsion, we know what we need to do to get a nanoemulsion of CBD around 40 nanometers. If somebody called me the other day and said, we got to go to 20. I said, why do you have to go to 20? Well, we have to go to 20 because we think it's going to be more absorbent, et cetera. I said, well, we can go to 20, but I'm not sure you need to go to 20 and spend the extra money, the extra time. On the other hand, you may only need to go to 100. Because maybe you don't need as much absorbance as you're going to get at 40. So we have a lot to learn in this industry. I think our instrument is going to give the ability to do all of that. We're going to be able to control the heat, control the speed, control the pressure. A big advantage we have over the few companies that are not involved, that are involved using pressure, but don't have our patent pending valve, is that we're able to control the heat exquisitely throughout the entire process, and we're able to scale. But maybe most of all, most of these other, I'm pretty sure almost all these other systems, and there aren't many that are using pressure and some kind of shearing. The product is going through the pump. So when you have to clean in place, it becomes very difficult. We've developed a method, which is why we're excited. Our first patent was on the system. We've developed a method, David, where our product doesn't go through the pump. So that when you're looking at cleaning in place, you don't have to clean the pump because our product doesn't go through the pump. It goes right into our pressure chambers.
Okay. Is there going to require a re-education with people who use CBD products? If someone takes 125 milligrams of CBD oil, and they're only getting, like you said, maybe 10% of that. Is there going to need to be a re-education where it's like, no, this is a nano-emulsion product where you're getting 12, so you take 12?
My personal opinion is yes. We need some data. Again, I said milligrams. It's micrograms, but whatever it is, milligrams, micrograms. If you're using X amount of a product now, and you develop it into a nanoemulsion where it is 5 times more available, then you're either taking 5 times more, or you're titrating it down to the proper amount. So there's going to be some education involved. It's going to require for data. We're going to have our instrument out there, and others will be out there. And with those instruments, we're going to have to come up and educate the public, because if you need a certain amount, if you're used to taking a certain amount, and now you're in a nanoemulsion and you only need 1/5 of it, you're going to say, oh no, this one isn't as much. I mean, I look at the same thing. I went out the other day to refill my vitamin C, and I see 500 milligrams. I see 1,000 or international units, 1,000 international units. I see 2,000. I'm going, Now, what if that 2,000 were not as absorbent as the 1,000? I'm probably better off at the 1,000. So yes, this industry, the cannabis industry, whether it's CBD or THC, there's going to have to be a continued education on how much you need, what's the right amount, and what's the amount you're going to be absorbing from the amount that you're taking. Yes.
At those pressures, could you talk about the safety of the instruments and how easy they're going to be for these companies' technicians to use?
It's not with training, and it's not extensive training. They're going to be able to use these instruments. We're trying to make it what you might call plug and play. Okay. We have instruments, 350 of them now in the other platform of ours of pressure cycling, that are actually probably as complicated as this one's going to be, whatever that is, and they're used all the time with a day or two of good training, and then some on-off continued training. They're able to use it because it's virtually plug it in and let it roll. There will be the same system here in ultra shear technology. It is not going to be. It's complicated for us to build and to make it work, but it will not be that complicated for the user to use. There will be training involved. In terms of safety, we've built tremendous safety into our system. We'll continue to build safety. I should mention that all of our pressures are what we call hydrostatic. We're actually pressurizing water. And so when you think about water, if I filled the room you're in, which looks like a very nice room, if I fill it with water and without you in it, and I put it under, let's say 45,000 PSI, that water is going to come down maybe an inch from the ceiling. That's it. So if I let it go, it's not going to explode. If I pressurize your room now with just air, and I take that air down to a tiny dot of air and let it go, there's going to be a problem. But we use hydrostatic pressure. We're using water pressure. So we're pressurizing water, and we're flowing our material through the water. And then the pressure from the water goes through the container that the material is in, the bag, the container, the test tube, and everything inside of that will feel the same pressure as the water on the outside, but they're completely separated so that our material never touches the pressurizing fluid, which is almost always water. So it's very safe because we're pressurizing water, but water only compresses maybe 4 or 5% at that level. And so it's not going to explode. There are safety ports built in. There's computer backups that are built in that will shut the system down if anything goes wrong. So we've been in business now in selling instruments for about 10 or 12 years. Not these instruments, but high pressure instruments. Pressure instruments even go higher than this pressure, and everyone has a very difficult thing to start with in terms of getting into the industry, because everyone was worried about pressure equal to the Marianas Trench or higher.
Yeah.
But once they realized that safety is built throughout the system, they were able to come to grips with that, and that's no longer an issue for our customers.
One of the things, and you've seen it if I've checked a few of these out before, I always like to ask, what are your expectations? So you've kind of set the game plan in terms of releasing these instruments over the next year. What are your expectations for the industry over the next year and then the next 5 after that?
Well, that's an interesting question, because we made a decision to go to the CBD folks first and THC folks first, because when you have a company and you have a product, what you're trying to find is a place where there is a problem that you can fix. If you have a way to fix a problem, you're probably going to have a successful company. In the science field, there's a lot of people that develop things that have no market, but it's interesting to them, and they develop it, and they don't last very long, or maybe they just get other people to help fund them, and they make some interesting products that don't really serve much of a need. In this case, ultra shear technology can successfully fix a number of problems that are out there. And the one we looked at the most and decided to go to first, the old phrase, the low-hanging fruit, is the CBD, the cannabis market, because CBD has a tremendous potential to grow. That market, the cannabis market, has tremendous potential. But if it continues the way it is, where the vast majority of the active ingredient that can do so much good for so many people can't even be absorbed by the human beings or the animals that are taking it, it's not going to last. We have to change that. And so we looked at this as a problem that we can solve. We tested it out. We have clearly tested it out in our own system. And we've made nanoemulsions for 6 to 10 different groups of their CBD products, in which they were happy enough to give us a purchase order afterwards, or some of them just on the data and the movies that you saw, the videos you saw. So we think that we're, by solving this problem, by being one of the few right now that can solve, or maybe the only one that can really solve it the right way, which is using physics, not dumping a lot of chemicals into the material, that will be successful, and that it'll be both successful for us and for our customer. So everybody wins, and then the consumer wins, and that's the best of all. The consumer will win. So how much better does it get where we build something that other people use, and the consumer is the beneficiary at the end, and the industry thrives and grows. Now, so in the next year, yes, we want to get our instrument out. We want to get the first 12 made. When you're building a new instrument, you don't build a lot. In fact, normally we build 4. We're building 12 for sale. Normally we'd build 3 or 4 and just use them ourselves. We don't have the time to do that. We need to get this out and get it out quickly. We are a company. We need to survive and grow, and we think we will, particularly with this new instrument. So we take a little bit of a chance and build 12. I've got tremendous confidence in my team. So I think that from the last 10 years of the changes they've made and the instruments that they've made, and how well the first generation has worked, it's not much of a risk. So we're going to build 10 or 12 to satisfy the orders that we have. And then the next step is to build maybe 25 after that, because we know the market is far bigger than 12 or 25. We know that. We've had discussions with more than 25 or 30 individuals. Interesting question, though, what happens down the road? Because as a company, we have to look at the entire marketplace that can successfully use our product. And there are areas in the pharmaceutical business, there are areas in the cosmetics business, there are areas in in other nutraceuticals, if you put CBD in there, there are many other areas that could be just as successful, but perhaps much larger markets because they've been around longer. CBD market is expected to be a multi-billion-dollar market in the next 3 or 4 years. You're talking anywhere multiple reports from 12 billion to 26 billion over the next few years. And I personally, I believe that because I know many people that are using CBD and many more that will. But we'll have to look, and we're not going to walk away. We're not going to leave the CBD market and continue, but we're going to expand outside the CBD market. And the next question is, but is that cosmetics? Is it nutraceuticals? Is it pharmaceuticals? Think of all the emulsions that are in the pharmaceutical industry, very high value products in the pharmaceutical industry. If we can make vaccines and drugs more effective by making them more absorbent, topicals, ingestibles, whatever it is. So we're excited about the fact that we have a very large number of potential markets to go into. We're completely engulfed in making sure that we make our name initially in the CBD market over the next year or two. We're not going to leave that market. We're going to continue to improve our instruments and bring out new instruments, the smaller one, the bigger one, et cetera, maybe faster. But we're also going to be looking at some of these other markets.
So my last question for you is that this is now your fourth company. You've been in the industry developing products for a very long time. What keeps driving you every day?
Good question. It's a very good question. I am self-driven, and it's been this way my entire life. I started out in research. I was at Harvard Med for 13 years as a young research scientist working in hepatitis and HIV. Very, very interesting time in my life. But when I first started out, David, I have to admit, it wasn't until I had my first child and I was making, $12,000 a year. And that was a lot of money for me. I'd gone from 7 to 12,000, this is many years ago. And I realized I can't, I can't afford to continue to do just research. And I had this thing that said that what I want to leave this world a better place than what I found it. And to do that, I have to, spend my life in research trying to make changes, better changes. I realized, and this is a personal decision, that when I was maybe 25 years old, that there's nothing wrong with making money while you're doing good. I had this vision, and some people still do, and it's perfect for them, that their life is to be spent by doing something good. I changed and said, I want to do something good, but I want to be able to make some money at it so I can give some financial security to my family, and do some of the things that we all want to do during our lifetimes. And so I'm driven because the thing about science is there's so many needs out there, and there are solutions in science. If we just work at it and follow the science, we can find solutions to so many problems out there. Look at what they've done. Look at what they've done with the vaccines for coronavirus. I've never seen anything like this in my life. Less than a year ago, we didn't even have a dream of it. And now we got people going in for emergency use on vaccine. I would have, if you asked me this a year ago, 2 years ago, I would say impossible. It takes years to make a vaccine. But I've followed it very closely. And through science, it looks like they've done everything the right way. They've just really put a lot of effort and focus and money to it. And we're going to have a solution that is going to solve this problem for us, starting in a few months. It'll take all of 2021. It'll take everybody basically getting vaccinated, and we'll eradicate this just like polio and smallpox and many others. So I'm driven by the fact that there are needs in the world that we can answer, and I want to be part of answering those needs. And so at this point, I'm just I'm past the retirement age, but as my wife will tell you, I have no intention of retiring right now. But I'm also blessed because I have a son who's 16 years old. And so I said, honey, at least I'll work until Sam is graduated from high school. So I got a couple of years for that. So I'd like to go out on something big, maybe choosing the hardest thing I've ever done and having it work. Maybe that will say, okay, Rick, maybe it's time to slow down now, a couple of years from now.
Well, did your experience with HIV and hepatitis, did that make you more confident that there would be something that would help combat COVID-19?
You know, I'm very blessed in that I started a company that one of its first major products was used all over the world to help determine the accuracy of HIV tests in the 1980s, and also hepatitis B and hepatitis C tests. Now we have cures for hepatitis C, not for hepatitis B. We don't have cures for HIV, but we certainly have drugs that allow people to live basically a normal life with HIV. Never would have thought about that in 1983, 84, 85, 80, 89. So I was blessed in that my company's products were used in, I think, over 60 countries to help ensure the accuracy of the HIV tests. But even now, almost 40 years later, we don't have a vaccine for HIV. We don't have a vaccine for HIV. We have vaccines for other diseases, but not HIV. So I tell people how lucky we are, how unlucky we are of this pandemic, but how lucky we are that it is a virus that we could develop a vaccine for in a matter of less than a year. So because if it had been more like HIV, where 40 years later we're still trying to develop a vaccine for it, it'd be so much more difficult, terrible than it is now. So yeah, I look back and I look at what I did and what my company did for making tests, ensuring that tests had fewer false positives and false negatives way back in the 1980s through the products that my first company developed, Boston Biomedica. And I look at what we have now. We still have false negatives and false positives in the coronavirus testing, but it took us 5 years to get the first set of tests. We knew about HIV in 1981. It was March of 1985, so 4 years before the very first test came out. 4 years. We had tests coming out within months of this. So we're lucky as a world that science has gone so far that when this terrible pandemic hit, we're able to respond with tests and with vaccines and drugs that have all come out in the first 8 or 9 months that took years to come out, and some still haven't in previous pandemics such as HIV, previous diseases.
Right. Well, thank you very much for taking the time today, Rick. I really do appreciate it.
I appreciate you asking me. I appreciate you taking the time on the day before Thanksgiving. So I wish you and yours and Alex in the background there, all you guys and your families, a happy Thanksgiving. But most of all, I wish you a safe Thanksgiving. We are very close to being able to fix this terrible, terrible problem, this pandemic. And it would be a shame for anybody that gets sick now, and certainly anybody that dies now when we're so close. So I only hope that people now, the light at the end of the tunnel is getting very bright. Everybody should look at that light and say, okay, I'm tired, I'm pandemic tired, but 6 months from now, there's a solution. And so it's tough when you're this tired of wearing masks and living this terrible life we've had to live. But the end is in sight. We have vaccines. They seem to work great, and they're months away from reality. So I just wish everyone the best, and hope all your listeners will take that extra time, because a few months from now they're going to have the ability to fight this thing off through a vaccine.
Hey, the same well wishes to you and your family, and I can only agree with you that, like you said, the lights at the end of the tunnel. It's just gotta kind of hang on for a bit longer.
Just a bit longer. Let's finish it strong. Take care now.